Russia just launched a massive mechanized assault near Pokrovsk, led by 150 motorcycles. After Ukrainian drones caught them mid-preparation, the operation unraveled fast, leaving the fields littered with burning bikes, wrecked armor, and stranded troops. The goal of the Russian forces in this area is to advance and secure the key Pokrovsk-Kostyantinivka highway by advancing on the eastern flank of Pokrovsk. Earlier, the Ukrainian forces pushed them away from the positions near the highway and blew up an important stronghold at the highway intersection that the Russians previously held. Now that the weather is improving, they want to retake it to continue their advances. To retake this key intersection, the Russians are conducting massive mechanized assaults in combination with motorcycle-based reconnaissance units leading the assaults. The main advantage of the Russian forces in this area is the good weather, without any rain to muddy the ground, which would otherwise complicate any armored attacks. Furthermore, the intersection and its surroundings are located on a higher elevation, meaning there is less mud in the fields from previous rainy days, enabling mechanized assaults. However, Russian maneuverability is limited by an extensive network of Ukrainian fortifications, as the Ukrainian anti-tank ditches stretch across the gray zone between the intersection and any possible Russian avenue of attack. This denies Russian units any maneuverability, as they are forced to move through a predictable, bottlenecked road, which Ukrainians turned into a kill zone with landmines and tight drone observation, making any Russian assault inevitably casualty-intensive. On top of that, the Ukrainians had also placed dragoon teeth and barbed wire fortifications in front of the intersection, meaning that any surviving Russian forces would have to stop their movement to destroy these barricades, prolonging their exposure to Ukrainian FPV drones and firing positions nearby. Russian forces launched their assault with 150 infantry mounted on motorcycles, aiming to exploit speed and maneuverability while bypassing the Ukrainian Dragon's Teeth fortifications. The bike's narrow frames and light weight allowed them to slip through gaps and avoid triggering anti-tank mines, which are calibrated for heavier vehicles. This tactic reduces initial infantry losses and forces Ukrainians to engage each rider individually with FPV drones, raising the risk of some breaking through the lines. Survivors could then secure forward positions, scout Ukrainian defenses, and dismantle obstacles like barbed wire and dragon's teeth to clear a path for advancing Russian BMPs and tanks. However, Ukrainian drone reconnaissance already spotted the Russian motorcycle units as they prepared to assault, allowing Ukrainians to swarm the skies with FPV kamikaze drones. Striking first, Ukrainians were able to pick them off several at a time, killing over 2/3 of the riders within minutes.
A Russian tank column rolled into a bloody disaster outside Siversk in eastern Ukraine, but Moscow's troops are still advancing. A surprising Russian armored assault ended in disaster for the Russians as they tried and failed to break through Ukrainian defenses outside Siversk in eastern Ukraine's Donetsk Oblast. But that doesn't mean the Russians aren't creeping toward frontline settlements, including Seversk, trading a few vehicles and a lot of bodies for every meter. Russian regiments are moving toward the city and may begin an assault in the near future, according to the Ukrainian Center for Defense Strategies. The doomed Russian armored assault outside Siversk, a relative rarity as Russia's vehicle losses exceed 20,000, and the Kremlin holds back most of its surviving tanks and fighting vehicles for future use, involved 6 tanks, 9 armored personnel carriers, an armored recovery vehicle, 12 Lada compact cars, 2 all-terrain vehicles, and a staggering 41 motorcycles from the 3rd Combined Arms Army. The Ukrainian 54th Mechanized Brigade and 81st Air Mobile Brigade struck back with the first-person view drones, bomber drones, and, presumably, artillery. Most of the equipment was destroyed or damaged. Special Kherson Cat noted after they and other Ukrainian observers scrutinized drone videos of the assault. Russian infantry losses are estimated at around the company killed and wounded, Special Kherson Cat reported. That's potentially more than 100 casualties. The horrific losses belie very gradual Russian gains around Siversk, however. Tactical gains by the enemy northeast of Siversk indicate that Russian troops have reached a line several kilometers from Siversk, CDS wrote. It's unclear how much the belated deployment of increasingly precious armored vehicles is helping the Russian war effort. As Russia's wider war on Ukraine grinds into its 42nd month, the Russians tend to attack with infantry riding on motorcycles, or even marching on foot. The growing proportion of the 46-ton, 3-person T-72Bs in the Russian inventory is the latest sign that Russian regiments are demechanizing. That is, evolving, or devolving, into infantry-first formations. It's a costly approach, but it can work. Russian infantry have exploited Ukrainian brigades' desperate manpower shortage. Kiev's army is short 100,000 trained infantry, and recently marched through gaps in Ukrainian lines northeast of Pokrovsk, further closing a pincer around that city 90 kilometers southwest of Siversk. Russian commanders tried to hasten Pokrovsk's fall by pulling their dwindling reserves of tanks out of the vehicle's protective hideouts and rolling them into action on the city's southern flank, where small Russian sabotage groups have lately enjoyed some limited success infiltrating Ukrainian lines. The problem, for the Russians, is where the tanks went. They traveled along a notorious road of death. For Russian vehicles threading from the Russian stronghold of Selidov through the village of Shevchenko, a few miles south of Pokrovsk, the 155th Mechanized Brigade's drones spotted the Russian tanks and infantry fighting vehicles, a dozen or so. Coming on Saturday, coordinated actions of artillery and unmanned systems forces of the 155th Mechanized Brigade thwarted another assault on the Pokrovsk direction, the brigade reported. The entire enemy column was destroyed. Ukraine may have the edge in drones, but Russia has a lot more troops and artillery. So the wholesale destruction of rare Russian armored columns might not mean much in the end. Russia can lose more of its dwindling stocks of tanks and still advance. CDS announced it expects more aggressive Russian action around Siversk in the coming weeks. The 3rd Combined Arms Army will try to break through to the northern bank of the Siversky Donets River between Yampol and Ryhorivka, and from the southeast towards Siversk. The firepower of the 3rd Assault Brigade's Artillery Division has been enhanced with long-range 155mm Bodana BG guns made in Ukraine. The 2nd Artillery Division released footage of the new equipment. The brigade artillery unit has received at least two 155mm Bodana BG trailed artillery systems, as evidenced by the photos on the unit's official page. Thanks to its long 52 caliber barrel, the new weapon is expected to become a long arm for the artillery of the 3rd Assault Brigade, which until recently had fewer long-range systems such as the British AS-90 or Soviet Mystère B and Giatsint B. Judging by the reported total of 3,000 rounds fired by the two named guns, Tisha and Valkyrie, they were delivered several months ago. It is noteworthy that in the video, Ukrainian artillerymen are arming the gun with a basic type of 155mm shells, which researcher Jeff 2146 identified as Western L-15, a ones with a CHGM-4, a 1/2 powder charge produced by the Turkish company ARCA. The maximum table range of such a projectile from a Bodana is 30 to 31 kilometers when fully charged. The Bodana BG is a trailed version of the artillery system that was developed for the self-propelled howitzer of the same name. Its prototype was first publicly presented at the end of last year, but work on it has been underway since at least December 2023. The start of deliveries of serial samples to the Ukrainian army became known in March this year.